flag and some waves. Yay, thank you for donating.
Welcome everyone to the High Ground, a Revenge of the Sith 15th Anniversary Celebration panel. My name is JediGeekGirl, and I'll be one half of your host for this panel.
And I'm Jess, and I'll be the other half of your host for this panel.
Before we get started, I would like to say a huge thank you for everyone who is tuning in, watching us, and to those behind the scene who help organize Forcefest. We are thankful and humbled to be a part of this, and to all you for taking time out of your day for watching. We would also like to take this time to mention that Forcefest is currently partnering with Make-A-Wish for donations. Please take this time out to make a donation. Link to that is below. With your support, we can help make a child wish come true. Before we dive into the panel proper, however, let's go ahead and tell you a little bit about ourselves, our content, and how we got into Star Wars. Jess, would you kick us off, please?
Sure. So I kind of like to say I was born a fangirl. I watched all the Star Wars movies growing up when I was little with my older brother. So I don't have that like clear memory of like, this is the first time I saw Star Wars. I just kind of always feel like I knew the characters from the time I was very, very young. And as I grew up, I made friends in high school and then in college. And so each time I kind of hit that new phase in life, my fandom would grow and expand into that new phase as well. And so now I'm at the point where I want to ingest all the content I can between books, movies, shows, and pretty soon I'll be excited to branch into comics, which I know you know a bit more about than I do. And I've been a podcast listener now for a few years. And this weekend, I'm actually starting my own show, The Faithful Fangirl, which will explore topics related to Christianity using things like Star Wars, Disney, Harry Potter to explain them. So that'll be part of Forcefest on the content creator stage later today. But what about you, JediGeekGirl? How did you get into this galaxy far, far away?
For me, like a whole new generation, I got introduced into Star Wars through the 1995 THX VHSs. When I was younger, in my spare time, I would go through my mother's tape collection and watch them. One day, I came across the Star Wars box set, and I don't remember my first time watching them, but I watched them, and I kept watching them over and over and over again until the prequels came out, and then I was a prequel baby, so I watched the prequel films. I was into the Star Wars film, but unfortunately, I did slowly drift away from Star Wars after the prequel trilogy concluded, even with the Clone Wars, and just real life caught up to me and kind of drifted away up until The Force Awakens was announced. At that time, I was drawn back into the fandom, and with the canon reset in 2015 was another reason for me to get in, was because in 2015, after The Force Awakens come out, it just lit a fuse in me, and then 2016, I started diving into the books and comics, so that was a great entry for me, and I've been hooked ever since, and I've been consuming as much as I can. As far as my content goes, I have been a podcaster for the past 4 years, 3 years of it hosting my very own podcast. I got my start in the Star Wars Destiny card and dice game by FFG, but I have slowly been changing gears into diving into the larger Star Wars universe as a whole. That transition for me will be completed in October later this year, where I fully change gears for my podcast, changing directly into Star Wars. I am so excited to be diving into the larger Star Wars universe with my podcast, and I cannot wait to get those episodes out.
I'm sure, and I know we can't wait to hear those and have you be a part of the larger Star Wars community. I'm so excited for that transition for you. I just can't wait. So getting into our panel proper, let's kick off with why we love Revenge of the Sith and what makes Revenge of the Sith so special to us. JediGeekGirl?
Where do I start with this? Revenge of the Sith is my favorite film of all of them. Even the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy, Revenge of the Sith, there's just something special about it that really connected with me because it is the best of the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy in one film. It is an emotional film. It is a film that connects with you if you buy into the tragedy. Every single time I get an emotional response. It's just so perfect for me as the experience because despite any flaws that it has, it really resonated with me. And that is why I wanted to talk about it for this panel, is because I love this film so much.
I hear you. I do too. So I agree. It is definitely hands down my favorite of the prequels. And if like you had to force me to pick, I would probably pick this one as my favorite of, you know, the Skywalker saga overall. And I think for me, part of that is I love movies. I love watching lots of movies. So even as I rewatch them, it's not, you know, you kind of miss that feeling of seeing it for the first time. Every time I go into watching Revenge of the Sith, I think that it's going to end differently. I'm like, okay, this is the 100th time I've seen it. Maybe this time Anakin won't fall to the dark side. Like if I just keep watching it, maybe it'll turn out differently. Like I don't know why I have this in my mind, but that's just always what it is. And I loved, you know, after the Clone Wars came out and getting to know Anakin and Obi-Wan and seeing their relationship, we got a taste of that in this movie that they then built on in the Clone Wars. But then if you kind of watch it all together, then seeing their fight on Mustafar so much more heartbreaking when you see like all the stuff they've been through the Clone Wars and teaming up and being together. Like, and this film is what we thought at the time was the end of the Skywalker story. You know, we thought this was going to be it, and it just, there'd be TV shows and books and comics, but we didn't think there'd be more movies.
I agree. I am the same way. I will watch the film, and every single time I am hoping that Anakin would make a different choice, and it breaks my heart over and over again. Anakin, what are you doing?
Right.
And there's just something special about this story. As you mentioned before, it is the close. It was the original end of the Star Wars saga. Well, it's not the original end, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It was the end of the era, and people always connect, I noticed in these eras, to the beginning or the end, sometimes the middle, whatever. But like I said, this film is like the pinnacle for me of bringing everything together. And we can debate about the execution all day, but for those of us who just step aside and buy into the tragedy, I think it is a very powerful moment that is in the top 3 Star Wars films whenever it comes to the most moving of them, in my opinion, at least.
Oh, I completely agree.
So, the Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005. Do you remember what your first experience seeing it was?
I feel really bad that I have to say this, and please don't judge me. I didn't see it in theaters. So I was 14 at the time, and at that time for me, I was only going to the theaters with my parents, and the only movies we really saw during that time was Harry Potter. And it just kind of wasn't super duper on my radar. But every time, I know I did see episode 1 in theaters because my brother took me. But for episodes 2 and 3, as soon as they were released on DVD, because what we would do is we'd go to the video store. We wouldn't go to the movie theater, we'd go to the video store. So we went to Family Video in town. And every time I would always browse the new releases. And every time there was a Star Wars movie, so episode 2 and episode 3, I was like, Mom, Dad, we got to get this one. We got to watch this one. Can we get this one? Can we watch this one tonight, please? And so that's how I saw it, was kind of at home with my parents. And I was enthralled the entire time. I think I watched that movie about 4 times before it had to be returned the next day, because on the new releases, you only get them for 24 hours. So I miss that I don't get to see it and didn't get that theater experience, because now as an adult, I love going to the theater. I love that experience. But it does still, I mean, I remember a time when there were video stores, and so that is still pretty special to me.
There is nothing like seeing a Star Wars film in theaters. Even if you don't see it during its original release, I highly recommend those, if they have the opportunity, to go see a Star Wars on a big screen. But for me, I saw it. It was my first midnight release, and I remember the experience. I did wait in line. I believe I waited in line like for an hour or whatever. I got in. There was a line, and I got in. And I remember the theater being packed. Everybody was in cosplay. There was people playing with Star Wars with their lightsabers up in front of the screen. And I sat down and I was looking, and I was drinking it all in, watching everybody. And to my right, I noticed somebody was carrying in a life-size Yoda doll. And then I noticed that everybody was reacting where they were standing up and they were doing the praising to it and cheering to it. And the guy who brought it up into the front for like 5 minutes sitting there, and the crowd was still reacting to it. So that was really my first experience seeing a Star Wars film where the crowd was really engaged with it. Obviously, I saw the other two in theaters, but it was a kind of a different experience. But this was the first time I was really into the neck of it, that I saw a Star Wars film during its first showing. So that was really exciting, and it's a memory that I will always cherish.
I mean, that's amazing. Like, I'm so jealous that your like first midnight show was like Revenge of the Sith with Star Wars. That's amazing. I think my first midnight for Star Wars was, I think, episode 1 when they re-released in 3D, and Jeffrey threw out in the chat he saw episode 1 on its 3D re-release as well. So that was really exciting. And I remember that time there was talk of doing all of them, and I was like, I remember me and a buddy of mine were like, we're gonna see, you know, oh my gosh, talking about all the different things we would see in all the 3D scenes, and we both looked at each other, we went, Mustafar. We were really excited for episode 3, and then, you know, the Disney buyout happened, and then we got 3 new movies. So
I would like to say that watching that on a big screen, and I'm getting chills just thinking about it. When the movie opens, obviously you have people cheering with the title crawl, and then you hear the war drums and the ships, and I'm literally getting goosebumps right now thinking about this. And you hear it, and then you see the ships fly, and they go down, and you see the Battle of Coruscant. That, to me, that opening, in my opinion, is the best of the Star Wars films. And I got the same feeling watching that I guess people would have, obviously I wasn't alive, in 1977 with A New Hope. That really captured my imagination. I'm like, here we go.
That's awesome. I love it. And Alyssa threw out in the chat that she said she'll never forget that feeling in the theater too. There's just something about being in the theater that you just can't get anywhere else. So I envy all of you who got to see it in theaters. I'm very sorry I don't have that same experience for this movie.
It's okay. There's bound to be another opportunity. That's for sure.
For sure. So like Disney, if you're listening, re-release episode 3 in theaters so Jess can get her experience. So what about now? How do you look at Revenge of the Sith 15 years later, post The Rise of Skywalker, with all the content we've now gotten?
I look at it as more important now than it is then. Obviously, it was the conclusion of the George Lucas saga at the time, but now, 15 years later, I see it as a very pinnacle point in canon, which we will get into later when it comes to tie-ins and stuff like that, because before Revenge of the Sith, and even during that period of time, the cornerstone was the Battle of Yavin. Anybody who read books and stuff like that, it was always the Battle of Yavin, where now it seems like the turning point and the central of the timeline is Order 66, which makes sense, because that is the rise of the galactic power. For me, it has gotten better with age. For the longest time, my favorite film was The Empire Strikes Back, because that is what you were supposed to say.
Right.
And then eventually I got to the point, you know what? No, I really love Revenge of the Sith. It is my favorite film. I know that that's not everybody's favorite film, but I just love it on part. I love it so much and unabashedly.
I agree. And I love what you said about like what you're supposed to say. You're supposed to say that Empire Strikes Back is your favorite Star Wars movie. And do not get me wrong, Empire Strikes Back is amazing. It's also celebrating 40 years this year as well. So congratulations to that. But I agree with you. There's just something about this one. It's got its own sense of magic to it. And I don't know if it's because that's the era we grew up in or anything, but yeah, that's what you're supposed to say. But in more the last like year or so, I've gotten a bit bolder in saying like, you know, it's Revenge of the Sith. I like episode 3, and that's okay. And I think in general, people are gravitating towards the prequels more, especially after the sequel series. And I think as it's aging, people are growing in their appreciation. And it's the tying into when it tied into the Clone Wars, like seeing that Siege of Mandalore running into Order 66, running into the Battle of Coruscant was like, it just gave me chills. Like it's just so wonderful that even the creators are honoring this movie as well.
Revenge of the Sith has influenced so much Star Wars content. What is some of your favorite tie-ins to Revenge of the Sith?
One of my big ones is actually the line in The Rise of Skywalker. When I went to go see that, was that now last December? Was that last December? It's COVID, right? Time is weird. But when I remember the hype on like the Emperor coming back, and people like, wait, how is the Emperor coming back? What's happening? And you get into the movie and you hear that line, the dark side is a pathway to many abilities one would deem unnatural. And I was like, that's all the explanation I need. Like, okay, sure, you got me. Like, I didn't need some sort of big, crazy, overarching explanation for why the Emperor was back, because he said that line, and it connected me immediately back to that moment when he's at the opera with Anakin and says the exact same thing as he's trying to. You see that beautiful scene where he's manipulating Anakin, and they're at the opera, and there's that big kind of glob thing in the background. It's just so beautiful that, set against this beautiful background, something really dark is happening. And it's so subtle, but so brilliant. So I like that Rise of Skywalker pulled from that moment and kind of honored this film.
For me, my favorite tie-in, Shay actually brought it up in the chat here, it's the Siege of Mandalore, the Clone Wars Season 7. Watching that and watching how that weaved in and out of Revenge of the Sith, it didn't just lead up to it like Rogue One did. It weaved in and out, was so perfect and was so beautiful that I just love it so much.
For sure. So all these are really great. There's lots more moments, but what are some of the areas you would like to see more of?
I would like to see, for those who know, the deleted scenes featured Padme organizing what will later become the Rebellion with Mon Mothma and Bail Organa. I would like to see that explored more in canon. Obviously, it is in the Revenge of the Sith novel. Obviously, you have the deleted scenes, but those aren't technically canon as defined by the rules right now. So I would like to see that storyline adapted, even if it's changed or whatever. I would like to see the political side of, okay, what is going on? Because you have 13 years since Palpatine came into power. He long stayed his power. The war was dragging on. You saw a little bit of this in the Clone Wars, but what was it like in the twilight of the Republic? And what was going on with Padme? Because there was more going on with Padme than just Anakin. Not that wasn't great, but it would be nice to have that expand upon, maybe a book that weaved in, or some sort of recanonization of that kind of story.
Dang. Yeah, I want to see that too. You are always I love when you answer that question, because you always have something that I'm like, yes, somebody do that, or you do that. That would be amazing. You always have such great insights. I love that. I mean, you would probably be able to speak more to this than I do. I've heard whisperings of this Sabe comic where it's after Padme's death, she's trying to go investigate and find out why she died, and is possibly looking for Anakin. Is that something you know more about than I do?
That is part of the epilogue of the Queen Shadow book, where Padme died, Sabe is at the funeral, and then Bail Organa reaches out to her. That has not been explored yet in canon, but it does jump forward in Vader Series 3, that comic, where Sabe, 22 years later, meets Vader, and she is still trying to figure out how Padme died. And Vader goes along with her to also solve that. It's still going on right now, so we don't know the resolution. But yeah, I would love to see that get explored as well, because even though we know that Bail calls her, and we know what happens 22 years later. We don't know what's going on during that time. Does she work for the rebellion? Does she not trust Bail? Does she know about Leia? These type of things.
Yeah, a lot of questions to explore there. And then, so we're both book people. And so they did the certain point of view books for the 40th anniversary of A New Hope. And then there's one that's coming out later this year for Empire Strikes Back. I don't want to wait 40 years to get a certain point of view book, or I can't do quick math right now, but I would love a certain point of view book for Revenge of the Sith, because I think that in reading those, there are so many different areas and point of views and different things that were explored that I'm like, I never would have thought of. And I didn't know that I wanted it until I saw it in these other books. So I think I would love that in just all of the series movies in general, but specifically this one because I love it so much. And the other thing, I want to know what the business is on Kata Nemoidia that doesn't count. I thought we would get that in the Clone Wars. I was always looking, and every time I think about it, I think, oh, well, maybe it happened in the Clone Wars and I totally missed it. And I haven't been able to find it. If it's done somewhere, please let me know, because that line when Anakin and Obi-Wan get back from rescuing the Chancellor, and he's like, it's not because I saved your skin for the 10th time, and Obi-Wan's like, 9th time. That business on Kata Nemoidia, that doesn't count. And I just thought it was hilarious, and I want to know what doesn't count. So
I agree with you 100% on the certain point of view story, because anybody who knows me knows, like, I want that certain point of view prequel content, give it to me. I just know that when we get it, it's going to kill me, because how many different stories of these Jedi are they going to share dying? I mean, the one on A New Hope with Bail on Alderaan just absolutely kill me, and they're going to do that to me over and over and over to me again in the Revenge of the Sith certain point of view book. I don't know if I can handle it emotionally.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think. Oh, that's true. Ugh. But yeah. So I'm seeing in the chat. I feel really good. I was nervous bringing it up, but a couple people have thrown out in the chat that we haven't seen the business on Kata Nemoidia. Okay. So on the one hand, I'm happy I was right. On the other hand, I'm like, but I want to see it.
Revenge of the Sith legacy goes way beyond its effect on the story. It is also an important film that has a legacy in of its own. 15 years later, what is that legacy?
For me, I think we've touched on it just a few times, but it is the last film that George Lucas was at the helm for. Like, this was the last live action film that he did. Like, he's the maker. All of this, everything that we're talking about, everything that we love, came from inside of his head and spawned and pulled out, and then other people came in and added their own things as well. But it all starts with him. And so this last movie was like his last movie, is kind of his final goodbye. A friend of mine who threw out the thank the maker. That's part of that legacy. You can't really have one without the other. You can't talk about this without talking about George and his impact on the universe and in the community and everything as a whole. And I think looking at the movie and how it is, I think you see a lot of George's heart in it as well. And it was his final goodbye. I think maybe that's part of why it's so good. I think he put everything he had into this last movie, and it's phenomenal.
I agree. The legacy of Revenge of the Sith is always going to be Lucas's final Star Wars film. The Clone Wars animated movie is, yeah, he had some hands on it, but this was his final film. And what a note to go out on. I know that I've been thinking recently, and when I've been watching it, I like the technology. You know, it gets a lot of slack for the special effects, but I also see where it came from Attack of the Clones. You see what he did in Attack of the Clones, and you look at what he did in Revenge of the Sith, and you can see a lot of improvements. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that if Lucas did another Star Wars film, and that he would have blended everything together well, even better than what he did in Revenge of the Sith, because I felt like in Revenge of the Sith he had his hands on it a little bit more when it came to mismatching the technology and stuff like that. So I just picture, like, what would George Lucas's next Star Wars film have been like, but it kind of sucks that Lucas didn't get to finish his saga, but I also think Revenge of the Sith was such a good note to go out on, because even though it wasn't critically as acclaimed as the original trilogy, it is often seen critically as the best of the three, and by fans too. So I think it went out on a solid note, and the legacy is always going to be the completion of Lucas's Vader saga. So even though you have the sequel trilogy continuing that story, Lucas, even though he didn't get to finish his saga, he got to tell Vader's story from beginning to end.
That's an excellent point. And you touched on, talking about technology. Star Wars has always been on the forefront of technology. It's always been innovating new technology and looking at what Star Wars has done tech-wise, even back in the 70s, creating the models and everything. And back in the early prequel era, it's always innovating, and technology really also plays a hand in Star Wars as well. So how did Revenge of the Sith affect filmmaking as we see it today?
Kathleen Kennedy said it best, and the Disney special behind the scenes feature, I'm blanking on the name of it, when she talked about how Lucas was 10 years ahead when it came to technology. I think if you look back, especially at Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, you can see how far advanced he was. That would later become the volume with The Mandalorian. He always had this talk, even back in the day, of technology that wouldn't happen till decades before they would. And I think we can see the effect on the movie industry that he pioneered, especially with Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones, especially in the volume, because it was in his head to have the ability to be able to shoot something basically, quote unquote, in your garage. Mm-hmm. So the volume, as much as people love it now, has its roots tying back to Revenge of the Sith and the prequel trilogy, because it was the next evolution. Yeah, he didn't really get to lead that charge. Favreau gets to, but without him pushing the ground, sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully, it makes me wonder where we would be in digital and special effects today.
Right. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. I've been trying to work my way through that Disney gallery on The Mandalorian. The how they shot The Mandalorian with that, I forget the name of what it's called, but I thought I heard in one of those episodes that was George's idea or George's vision, or that he was involved in that somehow.
He had the vision in his head that he was like, one day you're going to be able to shoot movies in your garage. Which is basically what the volume is. That the volume is it's a circular screen thing where you put practical effects and settings in the center there, and then you have a screen that is shot in real time that you can, whenever you move the camera, it moves with it. That it ties in, because if you watch Disney Galleries, that's the name of the show, they talked about how actors, when they would get in there, they would lose, like, what is the screen, what is the practical effects thing. It was such an immersive experience that at the time there was you couldn't have the technology to do but what he was trying to do with the green screen, because obviously you couldn't impose that on, for the actors. But if you took what George Lucas was doing and you put it into the volume, I think you would see that it would mismatch really nicely.
Interesting. Okay. That's awesome. So yeah, I just love that in my mind they're made of kyber crystals, because the thing I heard about it was the thing that makes up those screens is those crystals that they have to grow in batches, and you can't use crystals from one batch. You have to use the crystals that were grown together, and I just connected that to kyber crystals, and in my mind the volume is made of kyber crystals, and that's just how it works for me.
There are so many highs in Revenge of the Sith. We have so many memorable lines. We have wonderful characters and wonderful moments. What are some of your highlights of Revenge of the Sith?
Well, I mean, I think the first one I gotta say is, don't try it. I have the high ground. And that's what we named our panel. I mean, you were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. That's one. And I didn't write this down earlier, but somebody threw it out in the chat was General Kenobi and hello there. I was like, why didn't I think of all the Kenobi quotes are amazing. Ewan's one of my favorite Kenobis. One of my favorite scenes, and the one that I probably quote even just to myself most often, is when they're rescuing the Chancellor and Anakin and Obi-Wan are in the elevator and they're arguing about R2. And Anakin's like, don't worry, R2 will be along in a moment. And he's like, uh-huh. And he's like, and no loose wire jokes. He goes, did I say anything? And he just gives him looks like, I didn't say anything. So did I say anything? I quote that to myself or to other people at, like even at work all the time, and nobody gets it. I have a bad feeling about this. That's actually what my tattoo in a rubish says. And I think for me, one of the most iconic shots is Anakin storming the Jedi Temple. And the music there and just that John Williams score. That's actually my current ringtone right now on my phone. And that shot is like so iconic to that movie. They used it again in Last Jedi when Kylo was storming the base and, Master Skywalker, what are we going to do? There's an artist. His name is Danny Haas. He was at Last Celebration, was where I first met him. And he did these bookmarks that I thought were really brilliant. And it was like one side is a character and one side's another. So it was like Kanan, and then Kanan after, he's blind. And so one of them was Anakin. And on the flip side was like a little Padawan. And I thought it was like old Anakin and young Anakin. And I saw his post about it, and he had all these different hashtags. And the last hashtag was hashtag Master Skywalker, what are we going to do? And I was like, that is the most hilarious and most heartbreaking thing I've ever seen. I need to have one, and I do.
I don't even know where to begin. I'm thinking right here of moments that stick out with me, and there's so many. For me, when it comes to my experience with films, I always connect to the emotional moving scene. So right away, Order 66 really sticks out with me. And it is so emotional to the point, if you put on the music, I get emotional. And every single time I watch it, and looking back now, it's shorter than what you would think it. It's like seeing the Jedi kill off is like a minute or two. But it's so emotional. And in the middle of it, you see Yoda clutch his chest, and before that you had Padme and Anakin both looking out. Like those both are emotional scenes. And you also have Padme when she confronts Anakin. People like knocks the dialogue, but the emotion that Natalie portrays in that scene absolutely sells her pain and her heart. It's just, there's just so many. You got Palpatine being delicious. Oh my God, I love Palpatine in this film. He's my favorite Star Wars villain. I love, he's serious, but he's over the top. He's a threat, but he's also comedic. I mean, watching this film for the first time, all the comedy in it. You got Obi-Wan, hello there. You have the high ground. You have there's just so many moments in this film that you could pick any one of them. And even though I'm gonna pick something here that somebody probably won't, but even R2-D2 with the battle droid, when he gets picked up, he puts the oil, they let go, and he lights his boosters, destroying the droids. You also have when the ship actually gets vertical, R2-D2 sliding down. There's just so many moments in this film that really sticks out with me. Like I'm getting chilled and I'm getting excited talking about it.
Oh, it's the other one. Ray shields. We're smarter than this. Apparently not.
Well, there's just so much that really sticks out to me. And my favorite character from this, I mean, it obviously have to be Palpatine, but you have sexy Obi-Wan Kenobi. You have Anakin. I love Hayden Christensen's performance in this. I was so lucky to get to meet him at a celebration. And you have, and I think this is perfect to wrap up my statement on this, is you have the climax at the end with Anakin in pain on a table with the helmet coming down. And that is just so beautiful. In my opinion, I think that is one of the top 3 or 5 shots in all of Star Wars because it's so iconic. Like, you see the pain in Anakin's eyes, and then you see him finally accept his faith, and you see the helmet come down, and you're like, okay, Anakin, as what he was, is dead. He accepts his faith, and then you have Vader breathing.
And that puff of smoke is like the most beautiful little on the exhale as it like moves. That's the most beautiful thing. Beautiful bit of smoke I've ever seen. Yes, that is an excellent moment.
I also love, I know people don't, this moment is a moment that people like to knock, but I like the moment when he comes off the table and he's like, where's Padme? And she is like, it seems in your anger, you have killed her. And you see the pain. He lets out his anger and thing. It's like if you were in that if you were in that situation, and if you were blinded by rage, and you found out that you killed a person that not only that you love, but your children, you would lash out in pain. And for a lot of people, that is a verbal. And go online and watch a mother find out that her child has died, and you hear the primal yell and pain. And I think that is what that moment was trying to capture. And I love that moment so much because it is also recaptured in volume 2 of the Vader comics, where you get that pain too. So that, no, it's a little over the top, but it's this primal release of emotion. Like, that's so painful.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, because a friend and I have gone back and forth on what we think. We kind of agree, and I don't know if this has been canonized or not. You would probably be able to tell me better. Do you think, because in that scene, it's playing parallel to Padme giving birth, do you think that Palpatine is pulling Padme's life force energy and putting it into Anakin as he's becoming Vader so he can survive this surgery? And that's why she dies. Not that she died from a broken heart, but because they siphoned her force energy to keep Anakin alive.
I personally don't subscribe to that theory. In my opinion, if anybody is Anakin pulling on the dark side of the Force. I always viewed it as the Force. It was the Force putting things into motion, because it was the way of the Force balancing itself out. So I personally don't subscribe to that theory. I think if anybody would be doing that, it would be the Force or even Vader himself, drawing that life force. But I think we might find out in Vader Volume 3, so we'll see. But as of right now, it's not canon. It's a fun theory, but I don't subscribe to it personally.
Sounds good. Real quick, I just want to say bye to Alyssa if we haven't already left. She had to leave, but she's been throwing some fun stuff in the chat. One of her quotes from earlier was the Anakin, my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I can't not say it the way, Obi-Wan doesn't say it. So I just wanted to give a quick bye to her.
It's also good to point out the moments in that film that are currently applicable in everything that's going on. Like, how many times do people quote things from this film? Like you mentioned the quote with Anakin to Vader when my allegiance is to democracy. This is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause. You have all of these memes that people use and apply in real life. So
yeah, for sure. And real quick, I want to go through back some of the chat. Some of the people had thrown out fun quotes. My brother's hello there. Another happy landing. That was another Alyssa quote. Sith Lords are a speciality. Is another great one. So a lot of Obi-Wan quotes in the chat when Obi-Wan says Roger, Roger. So I too am a big Obi-Wan fan guy. So I love seeing that in the chat. I know there was more in here from earlier. I guess there wasn't. Okay, so real quick, last point before we dive into questions from our listeners. We mentioned some of the struggles and issues with Revenge of the Sith. What are some of the points that you would like to point out to somebody who's really kind of struggling with accepting this movie and appreciating it the way that we do?
I would recommend buying into the tragedy. Just go with your emotions. As Qui-Gon says, feel, don't think. Use your instincts. If you buy into the tragedy of what is going on between Anakin and Padme, that just breaks your heart. Maybe you don't buy into the romance, but if you step away and if you watch it, it's painful to watch this happen. And especially if you have watched the Clone Wars, that helped put those pieces into place, not only Anakin's fall, but their relationship and how, even though it is not what we would call a healthy sense of love, they did love each other in their own way. And it's so horrible and so tragic. So my recommendation is just buy into the tragedy of it. And I think you will find yourself enjoying it a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things about this movie I really love is the music. So the like Duel of Heroes that plays into, or Battle of Heroes that plays into and pulls from different themes that John used in the past. And in this movie, like, it is the birth of Vader. We see that turn and seeing how Palpatine just so carefully and perfectly and with just so much intention manipulated and just pulled those strings on Anakin. It just kind of is a like weirdly beautiful thing to watch how he's able to turn Anakin, especially when you see him in the Clone Wars and get to know him as well as you do. And you really, this movie is the birth of Vader. So if you're a Vader fan, you get to see how we get to Vader. Like, if you can only watch one movie from the prequel area, I think it should be this one.
I agree 100%. I couldn't say that any better myself. That will do it for the main section of the panel. It is now time to dive into our questionnaires from you, the viewer/listener audience. My favorite part, Jess, can you kick those off for us?
Yes. So right now, for the last bit of the panel, we're going to open up some slots here on Get Vocal. So if you see them, there's the button. You just hit grab this spot. You'll be able to come on video and ask us some questions. So
you can also drop some questions into the chat, and we can read them off too if you're not comfortable jumping on.
Yes.
Until somebody jumps on or leaves us a question, let's go ahead and talk about a little bit more about the film. We were talking about some of your favorite moments and stuff like that. What do you think was one of the performances that don't get a lot of attention? Like, everybody talks about Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, everybody talks about Palpatine, but what is a subtle performance that you think really stands out to you in this film?
I think subtle performance. Well, so I don't know if this counts. So I'm a big Kit Fisto fan, and in I think it's episode 2 at the Battle of Geonosis, he gives that smile, and you get to see a little bit of Kit Fisto is the last member of the Jedi Council, or last Jedi who go to arrest the Chancellor, besides Mace Windu, who survives. I mean, he doesn't survive for very long, but I love Kit Fisto, and I thought that there's a few seconds you get of that actor is done, I think, really, really well.
For me, I think it would have to be Ayla's. Like, she isn't on the screen that much, but the actress who plays her, she does such a great job. You obviously see her on her planet. She's watching it. The graphics, the special effects, I think, really stuck out to me, and the shock of her troopers killing on her, and her death is kind of sad because the troopers turn on her, and then the camera pulls out, and you see her die. You don't see her dying, but you see the troopers killing her with the leaf covering her body.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Well, and then in that Order 66 moment, one of my favorite ones, like, that's weird to say, but Kai Mundi, it's so, they're on that snow planet, and he turns around, and he's like, come on, let's go. And he turns his back to him and runs And because he thinks that they're running with him, because every other time they've run with him, and then he like they stop and he just turns, and it's like, oh my gosh.
I also think it showed the brilliance of Palpatine that Order 66 was done by chip, so it couldn't have been sensed through the Force. So Order 66, when he executed it, it was a turning on to the chip, so the Jedi couldn't see it coming because they couldn't sense it. Where if you were trying to plan it, they could sense it through the Force. So the chip was just more brilliant by Palpatine on its execution of Order 66.
For sure. Yeah. And even like, so up until that point, like I was a fan of Commander Cody because he hands Obi-Wan back his lightsaber and is like, here you go. I forget the exact little quip that he gives. And then like 5 minutes later, he's like, oh, shoot him down. I'm like, Cody, how dare you? How dare you? Like it's the weird like dichotomy between loving all the clones and then hating all of them, but then we find it out with the chip, it's like not their fault.
John brought up the Kit Fitzgerald in the Clone Wars micro series, and that's actually a good thing to point out because I grew up with the OG Clone Wars shorts. I love that in its first time, and it's kind of like a double-edged thing because we did get it, but it's quote-unquote not canon anymore. I would like to see the Battle of Coruscant in canon portrayed. If not canon, at least we can still enjoy it. But the Battle of Coruscant, I think, is one of those things that has yet to be explored, that I think if they did explore it would be quite amazing. And if they don't explore it, I mean, you can just go and watch it with the original Clone Wars show.
Right. I didn't watch that one as much. The thing I remember, I had a friend in college who kind of introduced it to me. So I think we sat down and watched all of it just the one time. And I remember enjoying it, and we didn't, but it was nothing that I picked back up a bunch of times. The thing I remember is the braid, the Padawan braid, Anakin giving his Padawan braid to Padme. And I see Steven threw a question out into the chat. Excellent question. Would you like to see the Battle of Coruscant from the point of view of the Martez sisters from this last season of the Clone Wars? So JediGeekGirl, I'll have you answer that one first.
Oh my God, you were reading off the questions here, and I was trying not to interrupt you. Absolutely, I think that would be so incredible because so often these battles happen. We usually see them from either side of the conflict. We don't see them from the civil side. So could you imagine the sisters watching this, because obviously they are not at the top level, but maybe somehow they are up there and they're witnessing. Did they see this? I think it would be awesome if they wanted to explore it, to do the Battle of Coruscant in a one-shot Clone Wars movie.
That's a really great idea. And what I find interesting about that question is, given their change in perspective on the Jedi after meeting Ahsoka, how I'm so curious to see what they would think of the Battle of Coruscant, given it's a battle like between the Jedi and the Separatists. If their kind of change of heart about the Jedi after meeting Ahsoka still holds true. Or if they kind of are like, oh, well, Ahsoka was just, I guess, a very unique Jedi, and yep, this is how they are. So it's interesting.
It makes me wonder. It makes me wonder that they don't want to re-explore it because they want to honor how it was portrayed in the Clone Wars. So even though that version of events is not canon, they still want to honor it. Kind of like what Favreau is doing with The Mandalorian and the lore there. He's trying to tell his own story without stepping on things that has come before, even though technically he could because you have canon and legend. So maybe they don't want to step on that story. But I think it would be nice for them to explore even more, because as wonderful as that story is in Clone Wars, with the Battle of Coruscant, it's not that long in the whole thing. I think it's like just that part is maybe 20-40 minutes of just the Battle of Coruscant. Mm-hmm. So they could expand upon it, or if they don't want to touch upon it, they can do it on a different point of view.
Okay. I think there's another question here from Jeffrey. What do you think of Battle of the Heroes as a battle theme compared to Duel of the Fates? Because ironically, they briefly used Duel of the Fates during the Anakin Obi-Wan fight too. That was the point I was going to bring up. Is I think that there are echoes of Duel of the Fates in that Battle of Heroes as well. So, but I'm a Duel of the Fates girl personally. JediGeekGirl, what about you?
Don't make me pick both of them.
Okay, I think both is an acceptable answer, but for me, I'm for sure I'm a Duel of the Fates girl myself. But Battle of Heroes is like third favorite maybe.
I mean, I love Battle of Faith, but I think Battle of Heroes is a little bit more emotional because you have the emotional stakes between Obi-Wan and Anakin, and we didn't even talk about the lightsaber fighting in this. You have Anakin versus Obi-Wan. You have Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Dooku. You have Obi-Wan versus General Grievous. You have Yoda versus Palpatine. This film had the most lightsaber fights of any Star Wars film. Like, obviously, we know what your favorite one is, but what is your favorite of the lightsaber fights in this film?
Oh my gosh, I can't even believe we're this far in. But like, that's such a testament to how great this movie is we talked for like 40 minutes about this movie and didn't even get to the lightsabers. So I am a Anakin and Obi-Wan. I think that's my favorite fight of the movie, and maybe my favorite lightsaber fight in general. The one from episode 1 with Qui-Gon, Darth Maul, and Obi-Wan. They fight for each other as my top spot. So I pick both of those as my favorite.
For me, if you know me, you know my answer. It is the Yoda versus Sidious fight. I said before, Palpatine's my favorite villain. I love that fight because you have two iconic characters going toe to toe, and I remember watching it for the first time. I knew what was going to happen, but I didn't know what was going to happen, and I was trying to reconcile how is this going to down because Yoda cannot really kill Sidious, so how is this going to go? And when the fight ended, Yoda at that point in time, to me, it seemed like why did Yoda quit? However, looking back at it now, I can see that he couldn't push himself anymore without either failing and killing himself or giving into this dark side. He had to retreat in order to do what was best for the future of the Jedi. And for me, that really stuck with me. And even though Anakin and Obi-Wan, their lightsaber fight is at the center of the film, for me, it is always going to be Yoda versus Palpatine.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And then Sharon posted a really excellent comment. She said Dave Filoni's explanation of Duel of the Fates in the Mandalorian behind the scenes series that Disney Gallery we were referencing earlier was so critical. That song in the fight set the fate of Anakin. You watched all the, what did you think of his comment there and his insights to that?
I think it just confirms that Filoni is the heir to Lucas, that he understands the story of Vader and the Skywalker saga, especially the Lucas Skywalker saga. So for me, it was like, okay, tell me more, Filoni. I can sit you here and I'm like, okay, you talked about episode 1 and dive into the other ones. And I think it would be nice to have him talk about it, especially in the context of the Siege of Mandalore and tying that into it. But I do want to, before we head to a conclusion here soon, I do want to point out that this is a little embarrassing to me, but I remember not knowing Palpatine and Sidious were the same person up until I think shortly before Revenge of the Sith. I'm like, okay, I know Palpatine becomes the Emperor, but I don't know how Sidious gets out of the picture. So it wasn't because I wasn't online. I wasn't into the fandom and stuff like that because I was a teenager and I didn't have internet. But I just thought it was funny that I didn't really know that at the time. And it would be interesting for those people who watch episode 1 through 3 first, seeing that reveal of Palpatine and Sidious being the same person. That really has to be something.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, the movies played off really well. If you don't know, I mean, there's some really beautiful foreshadowing, but I don't think they're super heavy-handed with it. And so it is always I miss that I didn't I don't remember experiencing everything for the first time. So I can't, always speak to like, oh, that's how I felt. And I was shocked and everything. And I did want to make one quick comment about Dave Filoni. I know this is a Star Wars panel, but I would follow Dave Filoni into Mordor. Like, that's just, you're right. He is kind of the heir of Star Wars to me, because you can tell he loves it and he understands it in such a really, really beautiful way that he's great.
I see that Shan posted a question in our chat. She asked, didn't Liam Neeson not know about Sidious?
That I'm not sure of. I haven't heard. If that's a story, I don't know it. That was actually, if that is true, that's actually kind of hilarious.
Yeah, I don't think in canon, at least, I don't think he did know. I'm not sure about Legends, but I do know that there was a lot of him manipulating the Jedi in Legends, and Qui-Gon being a part of that. So I don't think he knew about Palpatine.
Right, and I don't think in Saga, I don't think Qui-Gon knew. John's gonna pop on here. Maybe.
Yeah, really quick. What did you guys think of the last shot in the movie, like with Owen and Beru looking out into the twin suns?
Beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. It was so well done to bring it full circle from A New Hope to this, and you have the echoes of Luke looking at the twin suns, but instead of Luke, it is Owen and Beru with Luke. It's one of the best endings, in my opinion, because it brought it full circle with it being something in the context of a story that fits. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was well done.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with JediGeekGirl. I think she said it. This bringing it all, bringing the saga full circle, and kind of closing that loop was just beautiful. And I mean, who doesn't love binary sunset? Like, and with that image of the sunsets on Tatooine, like, who doesn't love that?
Unfortunately, we are now out of time. Thank you so much, everybody, again, for taking time out of your day to watch our panel. Jess, do you have any last words you would like to say about Revenge of the Sith?
Just that I think it's great. It deserves to be celebrated. I kind of want to go watch it again right now.
I agree. I love this film so much. I wish there was more celebration going on in the fan community, but you know what? That's what this panel is for. And go watch Revenge of the Sith, and go watch it again. I love this film so much.
Me too. So before we get out of here and mention where people can find us, I just want to again like to mention that Forcefest is partnering with Make-A-Wish. So if you can, please, just in the chat, there should be a link to make a donation. Give what you can. It's a great cause, and they work to help a child's wish come true. So link should be in the chat. And if people like us and want to find our content, JediGeekGirl, where can they find you?
You can find me everywhere at JediGeekGirl, and you can find my website at IrieBellDestiny.com. You can find my podcast by searching your podcatcher of choice by searching IrieBell, and our social media page at /IrieBellDestiny. Our podcast soft relaunch will be happening in October, so please be sure to follow our social media pages for more info on that.
Excellent. My panel, Faith and the Force, will be on the content creator stage here at 2:30 Pacific time, 4:30 Central. I live in the Midwest, so I operate on Central time. So come on over and say hi to me here soon. You can also find me on my website at www.faithfulfangirl.com. I'm on Instagram at Faithful Fangirl. You can find me on Facebook by searching Faithful Fangirl. I'll be launching my podcast this Tuesday, September 1st. And the first 2 episodes are going to be available on the website. And I also want to thank our admin for the panel today. Jeffrey did an excellent job for us doing all the techie stuff. That's where you can find me.
Till we meet again, everyone, thank you again so much for tuning in. Stay safe, and may the Force be with you.
Bye.